I always thought betrayal would sound like a slammed door. But for me, it came with a soft ping and the words, "Sorry sis, it's for the best." If you've ever trusted someone with everything and watched them turn that trust into a weapon, stay with me. This story might feel too familiar, because this wasn't about one moment. Not really. It started long before that text, long before the bank app. It began with blind faith and a brother who smiled too easily. I'm Elyse Varnell. I'm 34. I used to run a small editorial column in Atlanta. I thought I knew my family, thought I knew who I was. Before I tell you how I rebuilt myself from nothing and made sure my brother's lies burned down everything he built, subscribe. One small click that means the world to storytellers like me trying to bring you even better stories. But back then, I wasn't planning revenge. I was staring at my phone in a grocery store parking lot, with frozen peas thawing in the back seat, and my world unraveling. It started with a bounce transaction. I just left Trader Joe's, juggling a bag of oranges and a gallon of oat milk, when my debit card chirped. Insufficient funds. My breath caught. That couldn't be right. I opened the banking app. The screen loaded, then flashed red. Balance, $314. Below it, a wire transfer for $48,020, authorized by me, except I never did. And just above it, a text from Gideon. "Sorry, sis. It's for the best." My hands were shaking so hard I dropped my keys. The oranges rolled into the street, but I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe, because that money wasn't just numbers. It was years of scraping by, skipping dinners, freelance gigs until 3 a.m., all gone. I should have driven straight home. Instead, I sat in the car, windows fogged, my own reflection staring back at me, hollow-eyed, humiliated. I called him, straight to voicemail, then again, and again, and again. Finally, I called home. Maris answered, my mother. Her voice was light, like nothing was wrong. "Elyse, honey, how's your day?" I didn't even say hello. "He drained my account, Mom. Gideon stole from me." A pause, then her exhale. "Sweetheart, maybe he just needed a little help." I almost laughed. "Help? That was my life savings, Mom." "Well, maybe don't make such a fuss about it. You always did get so worked up over things." Worked up, right. I didn't remember hanging up, just the silence after, and the way my throat closed until it felt like I was swallowing glass. 2 hours later, I was at my parents' house. The driveway still smelled like cut grass and pool chlorine. Inside, the dinner table was already set, napkins folded just so, as if nothing had happened. Gideon was there, smiling, a glass of red wine in hand. "Hey sis, you made it." I stared at him. Tried to find the boy I grew up with, the one who used to tape my ballet shoes when I couldn't afford new ones. But all I saw was smugness. "You took everything." He shrugged. "I needed it more. You wouldn't understand." Then he winked, like it was some kind of inside joke, like I was supposed to laugh. My father, Roland, didn't say a word, just buttered his bread like we were talking about the weather. "We don't need to make this dramatic," he muttered. I stood. My chair scraped so loud it made Maris flinch. "You're all just okay with this?" No one looked at me. "Fine," I said. "Then you can all enjoy dinner without me." That night, I packed a duffel bag. No plan, no destination. I only knew one thing. I was done with the guilt, the gaslighting, the lies wrapped in linen napkins and polite smiles. As I drove away from Atlanta, the highway lights smeared across my windshield like tears. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay. I ended up in Savannah. The air there tasted different, salty and sweet, like something rotting under sugar. I rented a one-room walk-up with peeling paint and a crooked ceiling fan, the kind of place that hummed with other people's stories. For the first week, I slept on a futon, ate cereal from the box, and said nothing to no one. But on the 7th day, I opened my laptop, and I wrote one line, "They think I'm gone." My finger hovered over the period, and then I whispered, "They're going to regret it." Savannah didn't welcome me. It tolerated me. The air here was heavier, thick with salt, history, and the kind of silence that lingers between people who stopped talking years ago. My new apartment was barely wide enough to stretch my arms. Peeling wallpaper curled like dying leaves near the ceiling. The window screeched whenever I cracked it open, letting in the drone of distant freight trains and the occasional whistle from the river. But it was mine, and no one here called me overdramatic. I kept the lights dim most days, too bright, and I'd see the cracks, literally and metaphorically. Instead, I lit the room with a single desk lamp, amber glow, cheap bulb, a comfort. I worked quietly. Job boards, freelance pitches, half-hearted cold emails to editors who forgot I existed. Nothing stuck. Until I wandered into a cafe called The Wren, a narrow space with cracked tile floors and coffee that tasted like burnt apology. I liked it immediately. She was already there. Corner booth, laptop open, glasses on. She looked like someone who didn't miss a thing. "You're in my seat," she said, not looking up. I blinked, then glanced around. The place was practically empty. "Right," I muttered, sliding out. "Sorry." "Wait," she said. "You're not from here." That was her opener. Her name was Taryn Holt, a voice like gravel and caffeine. She used to run a column at the Ledger, one of the only papers in town that still had teeth. Now she freelanced. Investigative work, corruption, cover-ups, the kind of stories that rattled cages. I told her nothing at first, just that I was a journalist, taking time off. She didn't press. But the next day she handed me a name scribbled on a napkin. "Start with him," she said. "City zoning commissioner. He's dirty. No one's touched the story yet." The napkin smelled like peppermint gum and printer ink, and for the first time since Atlanta, I felt something I hadn't dared to touch. Purpose. I spent the next week in the public records office. The building was too cold, and the fluorescent lights buzzed like gnats near my ears. Still, I went back. Every day. Buried in permits, audit reports, committee notes. Some nights I fell asleep on the futon with highlighters in my hair. Other nights I paced in circles, whispering names to myself like a mantra. Gideon, Taryn, Roland, Maris. Why? I didn't say their names with longing. I said them like they were suspects. Then, on a Thursday night, the silence broke. My phone buzzed. No caller ID. I answered. Habit, maybe. "Come home, Elyse." His voice. Gideon. Just 2 words. But I felt every syllable like a bruise blooming beneath my ribs. "Don't hang up," he said quickly. "Please, just listen." I didn't respond. "I didn't mean for things to get so... Look, it wasn't all my fault, okay?" I closed my eyes. My nails dug into my thigh until I almost bled. "You stole everything," I whispered. "I borrowed it," he said. "I was going to pay you back." "With what? Your next lie?" "You don't understand what I'm dealing with, Elyse. It's bigger than you think." That stopped me. "Then explain it," I said, heart hammering. But the line went dead. I stared at my reflection in the darkened screen. I looked hollow, not broken, just emptied out. I told myself to forget it, to move on. But that night, just after midnight, I found something strange. A slip of paper shoved under my door. No envelope, no signature, just 3 words, typed in all caps. "Watch your back," no explanation, no date, no name. I stared at it until dawn. Had Gideon sent it? Someone else? Was it a warning or a threat? I folded it neatly, slipped it into my journal, didn't tell anyone. But after that, I started double-locking the door. The twist came 2 days later, at the Wren. Taryn slid into the booth without a greeting. "I heard your name," she said flatly. I looked up, my pulse quickened. "Where?" "Old contact at City Hall. Someone's been asking around about you, loudly." I swallowed. "Family?" She didn't answer, just sipped her coffee. "You bring drama, Varnell," she said. "Question is, do you bring it on purpose?" I almost laughed, but there was no humor in her tone. "No," I said, "but I'm tired of pretending it didn't happen." She studied me a long moment, then nodded. "Good. Let's give them a reason to regret it." That was the day she gave me access to her research files. Dozens of PDFs, photos, voice memos, a web of shady deals, misused funds, fake nonprofits, the kind of rot that doesn't just fester. It infects everything. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a name, Gideon Varnell. Not as a victim, not even as a bystander, as a participant. I felt my breath catch. A cold wave passed over my shoulders. All this time, he hadn't just stolen from me. He'd been building something foul. And suddenly, I wasn't just angry, I was curious. I turned to Taryn. "How deep do you think this goes?" She gave a slow smile. "Deep enough to bury you if you're not careful." Later that night, I lay in bed, the fan blades squeaking overhead. Outside, the street was quiet, too quiet. I kept seeing the words on the note. Watch your back. Not just a warning anymore, a promise. And somehow, I knew the worst was still ahead. Savannah's city archives didn't smell like corruption. They smelled like mold and toner. Dust floated in the morning light like fallout from something ancient, and the overhead lights flickered just enough to feel personal. It was quiet, too quiet for a place with so many secrets. I'd brought coffee in a paper cup, lukewarm now, and my notebook was already stained with notes I didn't remember writing. Taryn had circled the commissioner's name in red ink and whispered, "Start there." So I did. But what I found went further than either of us imagined. I pulled up a file labeled Savannah Redevelopment Plan, 2018-2022. Thin paper. Ink faded in spots. My fingertips blackened as I flipped through line items, street repairs, utility improvements, youth programs, most of it standard. But something caught my eye. A company name repeated across multiple invoices, Calder and Finch Holdings. It meant nothing to me, but it showed up everywhere. Land purchases, consultant fees, even a bizarre $85,000 line for community outreach meals that, according to the sign-in sheets, only fed 6 people. I scanned the room. A man 2 rows away was dozing over a folder. Another woman wore earbuds and bobbed her head to something upbeat. No one was watching. My fingers moved faster. I pulled a record request for Calder and Finch. Nothing came up in the business registry. Fake entity. I leaned back in the wooden chair, spine aching. The thought slid in like a cold breeze. This wasn't just greed. It was organized. And then something else hit me. In a box marked Supplemental Visuals, I found a photograph. Low resolution. A grainy snapshot of a ribbon-cutting event from 2019, and standing behind the commissioner was Gideon. My breath caught mid-inhale. He looked younger, leaner. No suit, just a casual blazer and that same effortless smirk. I hadn't known he was ever in Savannah. He'd told me once that he hated coastal towns, said the humidity got in his blood. Liar. I took out my phone and snapped a picture of the image, fingers trembling just enough that the first shot blurred. Why was Gideon there? Why hide it? And what did Calder and Finch have to do with him? I spent the next 2 hours digging for a thread. Most of the pages in the commissioner's file were intact, until I hit the financial disclosures. That's where things got strange. 3 consecutive pages were missing, just torn out. No explanation. My pulse quickened. Someone had tried to bury something. I packed up fast, tucked the photo back neatly, and walked out with my coffee, now cold enough to sting when I drank it. Back in my apartment, the silence was sharper than usual. I replayed that photo over and over in my mind. Gideon, smiling, like he belonged there. Like this wasn't a coincidence, but a partnership. I opened my laptop, typed Calder and Finch Holdings Savannah. Nothing. Then Gideon Varnell plus Savannah. Still nothing. But when I searched Gideon Varnell with the commissioner's name, a cached forum post popped up from a small zoning complaint board dated 2 years ago. Commissioner took bribes from Varnell, same name as the guy in Atlanta case. Anyone confirm? 1 comment. No replies. The post had been flagged and removed, but someone had noticed. Someone out there had seen the name Varnell and heard the whispers. I couldn't prove it, yet. But something in my gut twisted. Gideon didn't just steal from me. He was laundering money, greasing palms, pretending to be a consultant in some half-baked shell company. And I had proof, or at least the start of it. Still, something didn't sit right. I walked over to my window. The sun was setting, casting long streaks of gold over the crumbling bricks of the building across from mine. Down on the street, a kid bounced a basketball against the curb, the sound rhythmic, grounding. But in my chest, everything felt weightless. My brother had always been reckless. But this felt deliberate, strategic. There was a knock at the door. I froze. It was soft. Once, then again. I walked over, heart tapping against my ribs. "Who is it?" No answer. I looked through the peephole. No one there. I opened it slowly. The hallway was empty, except for a manila envelope on the floor. No markings. I picked it up and brought it inside, holding it like it might bite. Inside was a single piece of paper, typed, plain font. "You're getting close. He'll know soon. No name, no return address. Just that line." I reread it 3 times before setting it down on the table. My palms were sweaty. I could feel the adrenaline rising, like something inside me bracing for a fall. But there was no fear. Not anymore. I looked over at the photo of Gideon I'd printed earlier. Him, grinning beside a man I now knew to be filthy. My voice was barely a whisper. "What are you hiding, Gideon?" The fan above me ticked softly. Outside, the basketball had stopped bouncing, and I knew, whatever came next, I wouldn't be able to unsee it. I didn't want to call her, but I did. Maris answered on the second ring. Her voice still carried that clipped politeness, like she was hosting a garden party no one actually wanted to attend. "Elyse, well, this is a surprise." I could already feel the knot forming at the base of my neck. Tight, familiar. "I need to talk to you." A pause. Silverware clinked in the background. She was probably setting the table again, even if no one was coming, because keeping up appearances had always been her favorite coping mechanism. "Now's not a great time, honey. Your father just got home and—" "It's about Gideon." That stopped her. "Oh," she said softly. "What about him?" "You said he was in Atlanta, but I found a photo. He was in Savannah 2 years ago, smiling next to a city official under investigation for fraud. You didn't think that was worth mentioning?" Her exhale crackled through the line. "Elyse, come home, please." It didn't sound like an invitation. It sounded like a containment order. "Why?" I asked. "So you can gaslight me again over wine and pork tenderloin?" "That's not fair," she snapped. "We didn't know how bad it had gotten. Gideon, he wasn't well." "He was never well, Mom. You just kept covering for him." Her voice dropped. "We thought if we helped him, just once more, he'd turn things around. That's all we wanted." That was a lie. Or at least a self-soothing version of the truth. Because the real reason they helped Gideon? He was easy to believe. Charming, smiling. A son who didn't ask hard questions. I was the opposite. The daughter who remembered too much. Who never let things go. "You never wanted the truth," I said. "You just wanted peace." "Is that such a terrible thing?" she whispered. I didn't answer. Because what was I supposed to say? That I used to think peace came from knowing everything? Now I wasn't sure if I even wanted to know how deep this hole went. We hung up without a goodbye. I sat for a while. The fan overhead spun lazy circles. Outside, a dog barked 3 times, then silence. The ache in my chest wasn't rage anymore. It was grief, the kind that sat behind your ribs like a sleeping animal. Heavy, warm, impossible to move. I thought about being 14, finding out Gideon had stolen money from our neighbor's charity box. I told my parents. They said he was just curious, said it was a phase. I was grounded for spying. That was the night I realized who they would always choose. Now I saw it all again. The patterns, the excuses, and the way they called it love. 2 hours later, my phone rang again. Roland. I let it go to voicemail, but he called back. Then again. On the 4th try, I answered. His voice was rougher than I remembered. "I know you talked to your mother." "Yeah," I said flatly. "She invited me home like nothing happened." "Don't come back." That stopped me. "Excuse me?" "Just let it go, Elyse, please. This thing with Gideon, it's not what you think." I sat up straighter. "Then tell me what it is." "I can't." He sounded tired, but not confused. Not surprised. He knew. He'd always known. "Did you help him?" I asked. "With the money? The fake company?" The line was quiet. Too quiet. "Dad?" He inhaled sharply. "There were things I had to do, things to protect this family." "From what?" "From ruin. From disgrace. From people like you who only see one side of the story." The words hit like a slap. "People like me?" "You never understood how fragile everything was. You just poked at wounds." I felt my jaw tighten. "No. I saw the wound. You kept pretending it wasn't infected." "Don't do this, Elyse." "Then answer me this," I said, voice shaking. "Did you know he emptied my account before it happened?" "Yes," he said. No hesitation. The silence between us was colder than anything I'd felt since Atlanta. We thought if he had a way out, just once, he'd take it. We thought he'd pay you back. He didn't. I know. He sounded almost apologetic, but apologies mean nothing when you're still holding the knife. You didn't just betray me, I said. You chose him, again. He's my son. So am I. I hung up. My hands were trembling, and I didn't try to hide it. I sat on the floor for a long time, knees pulled up to my chest. I wasn't just fighting my brother. I was fighting the entire foundation of what I thought love meant. And somewhere, buried under guilt and loyalty, they still believed they were protecting me. That was the twist. They thought their silence was mercy. They didn't realize it was a war. Later that night, I opened my journal, flipped to the page with the threatening note, "You're getting close. He'll know soon." Now, I wondered, was it really about Gideon, or was someone else afraid I'd dig too deep? I circled the words with red ink and underlined he 3 times. My phone buzzed. A new number, no name. The message was simple. You've seen too much. Back off, or it won't just be your money. My fingers went cold, and just like that, the mystery deepened. This wasn't about family anymore. It was about survival. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my futon, arms crossed over my chest like I was bracing for impact. The message still glowed on my phone. You've seen too much. Back off, or it won't just be your money. The words felt like teeth, already gnawing at the edge of my resolve, but I didn't back off. Instead, I traced the thread. The next morning was hot, humid enough that my shirt clung to my back before I made it halfway down the block. The Savannah sun wasn't gentle. It was punishing, the kind that made secrets sweat to the surface. I met Taryn behind a used bookstore off Oglethorpe. She was already smoking when I arrived, her sunglasses too large and her tone too clipped. "You sure about this?" she asked, not looking at me. "No," I said, "but I'm done playing defense." She didn't smile, but she didn't argue either. "Let's go then." We'd gotten a tip, a zoning official who'd suddenly resigned 2 weeks ago, citing mental health reasons. But the way Taryn said it, her voice low and bitter, made it clear he didn't walk away clean. His name was Laramie Fielding. We found him outside a rundown laundromat on the edge of the district. Gray cargo shorts, flip-flops, a man who looked like he'd once cared about order and had since given it up completely. He spotted Taryn first. No comment. "We're not reporters today," she said, stepping closer. "We're survivors," he scoffed. "What do you want?" "We heard you left suddenly," I said. "Wanted to know why." "Why does anyone quit?" he muttered. "Because it wasn't worth the price." He tried to walk away. "Was it Calder and Finch?" I asked. "Or was it the commissioner?" He froze, turned slowly. "You don't know what you're walking into." "No," I said, "but I know my brother's in the middle of it." That made him laugh. Dry. Ugly. "Your brother? He's not in the middle. He's benefiting. There's a difference." Taryn stepped in. "Talk, Fielding, or we print your silence." His jaw clenched. "You think he's running the show?" he said, voice low now. "He's just a smile in a bank account. There's someone else, someone bigger, and they don't like being seen." "Who?" I asked. But he just shook his head. "Check the real estate deeds. The waterfront properties bought for pennies, the ones tied to that fake food program. It's all in there, if you know where to look." Then he walked off. Not fast. Just done. Back at Taryn's place, we spread out a mess of files across her kitchen table. Deeds, permits, contract scans. Each sheet crackled as I flipped them, the paper almost brittle from how many times it had been photocopied. We found the addresses, 6 buildings along the river, all transferred through shell companies tied to Calder and Finch, but one name kept popping up in signature lines. Elyse Varnell. He signed as consultant, sometimes logistics advisor, once, absurdly, as wellness coordinator. Each role more ridiculous than the last, but the documents were real, stamped, filed, legal, on the surface. "He's not just playing a role," I murmured. "He's legitimizing it." Taryn leaned back, her chair creaking. "And someone's paying him to do it." The room felt suddenly colder. I rubbed my thumb along the paper's edge, thinking back to that morning when he first called me after months of silence. The way his voice sounded, pleading, manipulative, like a magician stalling before the trick lands. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stood. "I need to see it," I said. "See what?" "Where the money lands, where it lives." Taryn nodded slowly. "Then let's follow it." That's how we ended up tailing a mid-level city contractor down the alleys of East Broad that night. He'd been listed on 2 of the shell company transfers, and he liked bars, cheap ones. I kept my distance. Black hoodie, baseball cap, the kind of outfit that made me look like I was hiding something, because I was. He exited a neon-soaked dive at 11:17 p.m., weaving slightly, humming to himself. I followed. Taryn stayed in the car, engine running. My shoes crunched over wet gravel as I trailed him through a narrow back alley. The air smelled like spilled beer and exhaust. He turned a corner and vanished. I stepped faster, only to be caught mid-step by a sudden shout. "You lost?" He was there, arms crossed, standing against the wall. "Or are you just a nosy little sister?" My stomach dropped. "You know who I am." "We all know who you are." He stepped closer. "And we know how to make problems disappear." "Like you made the files disappear?" I shot back. "The 3 pages missing from the redevelopment report?" His smirk faded. Just a flicker. "You're playing a dangerous game." "So are you," I said. "But I'm better at it." He lunged. Not a full attack, just a shove, but it was enough. I stumbled backward, hand scraping along the brick wall. Pain bloomed instantly. Then he was gone. Just like that. Back in the car, Taryn stared at my bleeding hand. "You okay?" "Yeah." But I wasn't. Not really. I wrapped it in a napkin and watched the blood soak through. "They're getting sloppy," I whispered. She didn't ask what happened, just handed me a flask of something strong. Back in my apartment, the lights flickered when I turned them on. Probably nothing. But in that moment, it felt like a warning. I sat down, pulled up the folder again, scrolled through every document we'd collected, and that's when I saw it. A payment, buried in a list of shell invoices, $250,000, transferred not to Gideon, but to a judge's private foundation, a name I recognized from family court, someone who ruled on one of Gideon's old assault charges, and suddenly everything tilted. This wasn't just money laundering, it was influence, protection, a whole system built to keep men like Gideon untouchable. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned, and then I whispered, "This goes deeper." The number didn't lie. $250,000 transferred to a foundation run by Judge Leon Barrow, a man who dismissed Gideon's assault charges 2 years ago with the phrase, "lack of credible testimony." I remembered watching that case on a grainy live stream from a press room, chewing on a pen cap, whispering to myself, he'll finally be held accountable. But he wasn't. Now I knew why. The foundation was real, on paper. Community youth outreach, literacy campaigns, all smiles and ribbon cuttings. But the donation? Laundered, traced through Calder and Finch, another fake kindness masking rot. I sat back in my chair, the glow of my laptop bleaching my face. My skin felt clammy. The room, small as it was, suddenly felt too vast, like truth had stretched the walls out of shape. This wasn't petty theft anymore. This was infrastructure, a web. And at the center of it, smiling and slick, was my brother. I opened a folder marked Archived Calls, a dump from one of Taryn's encrypted contacts. Audio logs, mostly static, some garbled mess, but one stood out, time-stamped just 3 months ago. I hit play. "Listen, you don't have to worry. Judge Barrow's in, no delays, it's a favor, just like last time." It was Gideon's voice, calm, cocky, transactional. "Savannah's nothing without leverage, we own that, so stay cool." The recording clicked off. I rewound it, played it again. Every word landed like a bruise. I'd always known Gideon was reckless, but this was orchestration. A private empire built on lies, sealed with bribes, protected by power. And I realized something sickening. My money, the life I worked for, had helped pay for this. The scam, the bribe, the whole damn show. A knock rattled the apartment door. I jolted. My screen went dark. I waited. Another knock, then a pause. Then, "Elyse, it's me. Taryn." I opened the door slowly, still tense. Her jaw was tight, her eyes bloodshot. "We've got a problem," she said. She stepped in and pulled out a manila envelope, sweat-stained and slightly bent. Inside were photos, surveillance shots. One of them showed me. Walking alone, grocery bag in one hand, phone in the other. Another, me and Taryn at the cafe. Another, me outside the zoning office. Each photo labeled, dated, precise. My stomach churned. "How'd you get these?" I asked. "Someone left them under my windshield." "So they're watching both of us." "More than that," she said. "I think someone inside the city files is feeding them names. We're not just digging, we're disrupting." I swallowed the rising panic. "So now what?" She didn't answer, but her eyes said it all. We'd crossed a line. Later that night, I paced the floor, rereading every file, every note, every scribbled theory I'd stacked on my nightstand. I ended up back in that moment, when Gideon texted me after draining my account. "Sorry, sis, it's for the best." That smug, empty apology meant more now. He wasn't desperate. He was funding something, building his foothold in Savannah's shadows. And then I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. I was 17. Gideon was 15. He came home one night with blood on his shirt, said he fell on a fence. Roland didn't press him. Maris made cocoa. I cleaned the shirt. But I knew then, just like now, Gideon never fell. He hurt someone, and someone made it go away. That was always the pattern. Silence, not apology. Spin, not truth. Now I saw it full circle. He hadn't changed. He'd just professionalized it. The next morning, Taryn called. "You need to come with me." We met near the river, where Savannah's southern humidity clung like guilt. She led me to a storage unit. Inside, cardboard boxes, ledgers, printouts, evidence from a whistleblower who'd vanished last year. The woman had been investigating zoning fraud, and at the bottom of one box, a tape recorder. I hit play. The voice on the tape? Gideon. Again. "We move fast. Funds go through Calder, then Finch, then we cover with a property bid. If the judge gets cold feet, remind him about his kid's record. I can make that public." I froze. "Wait, he blackmailed the judge?" Taryn nodded. "Looks like it. And no one did anything?" "They were too afraid." I stared at the tape, heart racing. The twist wasn't just that Gideon had power. It was how he used it, not just lies, leverage. He wasn't climbing a ladder. He was building a trap for anyone who looked down. And I had proof now. Tape, transfers, witnesses. But exposing him would come at a cost. My family, my last name, maybe even my safety. Still, as I stood there in that storage unit, my hands dusty, my spine stiff with resolve, I knew what I had to do. "We're going public," I said. "All of it." Taryn raised an eyebrow. "You ready for what comes after?" "No," I said, "but that's never stopped me before." And just as I stepped outside, my phone buzzed. A new message. "You really think they'll believe you? You're just the bitter sister, and I'm the success story. Checkmate, Elyse." It was from Gideon. He knew, and now he was coming. There's something unnerving about being called bitter by the man who wrecked your life. But it wasn't the insult that got me. It was the checkmate. He didn't think I was chasing the truth anymore. He thought he'd won. Game over. I stared at his message until the screen went dim. Then I turned it off and tossed the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a dull thud. Not satisfying, just real. I didn't cry. I just stood there in the dark listening to the refrigerator hum like a heartbeat I didn't trust. That night, I barely slept. My body lay still, but my mind paced, circling every mistake, every missed signal. By morning, the humidity had seeped into everything. My shirt stuck to my back. My coffee tasted like metal. And trust felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. Taryn picked me up at 9. She didn't ask how I slept. We drove in silence for 6 blocks before she finally said, "You sure we're still good?" I looked at her. At the sunglasses that hid her eyes. At the knuckles clenched on the steering wheel. "What kind of question is that?" "A real one. Because you've been quiet since the message, since the photos." I hesitated. "Someone sent those pictures to scare us," I said. "To make me doubt who's on my side." "And it worked?" she asked. I didn't answer, but my silence was loud. At the library, we slipped into a back room Taryn had bribed a clerk to leave unlocked. Inside, chalkboards, a printer older than sin, and a bulletin board covered in post-it notes and red string. It looked like paranoia had finally found a home. She laid out the encrypted letter, The one we'd been avoiding. It was short. One paragraph. Barely legible. But the signature caught my eye. R. Dalton. My breath caught. That name. I'd seen it before. When I was 17, I found a check stub in Roland's study. It was made out to R. Dalton Holdings. I thought it was just another boring client. Now I realized it was a cover. He's been part of it longer than I thought, I murmured. This isn't just Gideon's empire. It's inherited. Taryn blinked. Your father? I don't know yet, I said, but Dalton isn't a stranger. We sat in silence. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on us. Just then, her phone buzzed. A text. One word. Cafe. Now. She frowned. Contact from the local paper. Said he had something for us. I nodded. My nerves were frayed, but forward was the only direction left. We met him at a rundown cafe with a flickering open sign and the worst bagels I've ever tasted. He wore a blue windbreaker and chain-smoked over his iced coffee. Name's Sean, he said. Been chasing the Varnell story for months. Got too close. Paper killed the story. Why? I asked. Because your brother's good at hiding bodies, figuratively, but sometimes literally. That made my skin crawl. He handed me a flash drive. Financials, emails, maps. But here's the kicker. There's a new player. Not just Gideon. Not even the judge. He leaned closer. You ever heard of Black Birch Solutions? I froze. I had. Not in a criminal sense, but I remembered seeing their name once, on a sponsorship flyer at a gala Maris dragged me to. They funded youth mentorship, community cleanups, all PR, all fake. They're not a nonprofit, Sean said. They're a fixer firm, quiet blackmail, discreet payoffs, high-profile damage control. Are they backing Gideon? I asked. More like owning him. Taryn cursed under her breath. This keeps getting bigger. But the twist wasn't the scale. It was something else entirely. Sean lowered his voice. One of their senior advisors used to go by R. Dalton. It's a placeholder identity, used when a fixer doesn't want to leave fingerprints. I stared at him. You're saying my father might have worked for them? Or still does? My legs went numb. Outside, a storm was gathering. The air went thick and gray. Lightning cracked somewhere distant. I felt it inside me, too. Gideon wasn't the only threat. He was just the surface, the face of a deeper rot. Back in the car, Taryn didn't speak. Neither did I, until finally she asked, What are you going to do? Keep digging. Even if it leads to your father? I stared out the window, watching the trees blur past like ghosts. Especially if it does. We got back to her place. She opened a new file. One of the documents from Sean's flash drive showed an internal memo, half redacted, but one part stood out. Target known as EV flagged. Recommend neutralization via character attack. Asset A in place, pending execution. EV me. They were planning to destroy me, not physically but reputationally, the kind of smear that doesn't leave bruises. Just silence. My phone buzzed. Another message. If you speak, you'll lose more than your name. You'll lose everything. No number, no trace. I stared at the screen, then looked at Taryn. They're watching everything. Then we give them something worth watching. Before I could respond, a knock hit the door. Slow, deliberate. We froze. Another knock. 3 beats. Then a pause. Taryn grabbed her pepper spray. I grabbed my phone. She opened the door a crack. A man stood there, early 30s, clean-cut, nervous eyes. He held out a yellow envelope. You don't know me, he said, but I think I was supposed to be next. I didn't recognize his face, but something about his eyes looked haunted, like someone who'd seen the edge and decided to step back, barely. He held out the envelope again. Please, I don't know who else to trust. Taryn motioned him inside. I shut the door behind us. The air in the apartment suddenly felt too thick, too tight, as if even the walls were listening. He sat, but didn't touch the glass of water we offered. I'm Michael, he said. I used to work tech for Black Birch, not front-facing, data routing. I thought I was building security tools for nonprofits, until I saw where they pointed. You worked for them? I asked. Until last year. Then I pushed back, got reassigned. And last week I found my name flagged on an internal purge doc, Asset B, that's why I came. Taryn opened the envelope, inside logs, payment trails, and a list of names, most redacted. But one stood out, highlighted in yellow. R. Varnell. Roland? I whispered. Michael nodded. He's not just connected. He was the bridge between the city and Blackbirch for over a decade. He fed them legal loopholes, helped smudge permits, even coached clients on how to sanitize files. My stomach clenched. Why are you telling me this? He looked straight at me. Because I heard what you're doing, and because I know what happens to people who try to leave quietly. You can't dismantle this from outside, but maybe someone like you can rip it out from the inside. He stood up before we could ask more. That's all I have. I'm disappearing. He left without another word. The door clicked shut like a final period. I couldn't move. Taryn stared at the paper in her hand, then passed it to me. I scanned the names, dates, amounts, and then a line item from 2 years ago. Transfer, $4,700. Source, R. Varnell. Destination, Gideon Varnell. Purpose, family resolution. I froze. It wasn't just Gideon, I said. Dad funded it, enabled it, maybe even suggested it. My voice trembled. They knew what he'd done, what he was doing, and they helped. I couldn't breathe. Every argument, every warning, every cold dismissal. They weren't out of ignorance. They were complicity. I stood up so fast my chair scraped hard against the floor. I need to hear him say it. Taryn didn't stop me. I drove to Atlanta without calling, didn't pack, didn't think, just followed the road like a pulse. It was dusk when I pulled into the driveway. The hedges were trimmed. The porch light glowed golden. It looked unchanged. But I wasn't. Maris opened the door. Elyse, oh God, what's wrong? I pushed past her. Where is he? What's going on? Where is he? Roland stepped out of the study, a scotch in his hand. He looked older. Or maybe I was finally seeing him without the filter of hope. You came all this way just to shout? No, I said. I came to ask how long you've been laundering your son's crimes. He froze. Careful, he said. You don't know what you're accusing me of. No, I do, I snapped. Blackbirch, Gideon, city zoning, and the $47,900 you sent to cover the theft he blamed on me. His jaw tightened. Maris stepped between us. Stop this, she said. You don't understand. Don't, I cut in. Don't pretend this was noble. I turned back to Roland. Say it. He drained his glass. Didn't look at me. You always wanted a villain. Now you've got one. That was it. No denial, no apology, just that. I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted salt at the corner of my lips. You didn't protect the family, I whispered. You protected the lie. Maris reached out to touch my shoulder. I pulled away. Don't. I left without another word. The drive back to Savannah felt endless. Rain started halfway down the interstate, streaking the windshield like tears I didn't want to admit to. Back in the apartment, I opened the files again, looked at my father's name on paper, and felt nothing but the dull throb of betrayal calcifying into purpose. A knock at the door broke the silence. Taryn, you okay? I shook my head. No. Good, she said. Stay mad. We just got a tip. She handed me her phone. A voicemail played, low, distorted. If you want names, real names, check the ledger behind the old city records vault. But be fast. They're moving it tomorrow. We were already grabbing our things before the message ended. Midnight, rain still falling. We crept behind the records office with flashlights and gloves, found the panel, pried it open. Inside, a plastic-wrapped binder labeled Calder Archive, confidential pages of ledgers, bribes, properties, names. At the bottom of one page, M. Holt, $15,000. Narrative Control, Phase 1. My blood turned to ice. Taryn, she saw it too, her mouth parted, no words. They paid you. That's not... Elyse, I didn't take this money, I swear. Then why is your name here? Her eyes filled, but not with guilt, with fear. I don't know. We stood in that vault, two women surrounded by proof and lies and something between them now fractured. And somewhere deep inside, I felt it again. The next betrayal might not come from across the aisle. It might come from beside me. We didn't speak as we drove back. The binder sat between us on the seat, its pages still damp from the vault. Taryn kept both hands tight on the wheel, knuckles white, eyes fixed ahead like the road might accuse her too. The silence buzzed in my chest. Not just tension, doubt. I kept glancing at her. at the way her jaw flexed, at how her thumb tapped just once against the steering wheel every time we hit a stoplight, like she wanted to say something but was afraid of what it might sound like. When we got back to the apartment, I dropped the binder on the table. She hovered by the door. "You don't believe me," she said quietly. "I want to," I replied, "but you were the one who introduced me to this, who had access to everything, who told me when and where to dig." Her shoulders slumped. "So now I'm the villain?" "No, but I don't know who the villains are anymore." That landed harder than I expected. She grabbed her bag and keys. "Let me prove it," she said. "Give me one day." And just like that, she was gone. I stared at the closed door, wondering what I'd just done, wondering if I was safer now, or completely alone. I didn't sleep. Instead, I worked. At 3:47 a.m., I uploaded a folder of documents, voice recordings, and scanned ledgers to a private server I'd kept since my Atlanta days. I named the file varnellexpose.zip. Then I set a timed autosend to 3 journalists I trusted and 1 enemy I didn't. If I disappeared, the truth wouldn't. By morning, I had a plan. I drove straight to the Savannah Tribune. I walked in with nothing but the binder and the flash drive. The front desk clerk tried to stop me, but when I dropped the phrase, "judicial bribery and shell company fraud with federal fingerprints," she led me straight to the managing editor. He listened, eyes wide, hands still. Then he said, "You better have more than accusations." I handed him the drive. "Open it, and don't say a word until you've listened to the audio files labeled Barrow 1 and Gideon 2. He played them. We sat in silence while my brother's voice echoed through the room, threatening, laughing, admitting. By the time it ended, the editor's hands were trembling. "You want to publish this?" "No," I said. "I want to bury them with it." He stood. "Give me 2 hours." I nodded. I didn't wait. Instead, I drove to the old parking lot behind the courthouse, sat with my seat reclined and engine off. A part of me expected Gideon to walk up right then, to tap on the glass with that smug smirk and say something like, "You really think this changes anything?" But he didn't. He didn't know yet. At 11:15 a.m., the Tribune released a breaking digital special. Savannah's Shadow, Shell Companies, Corrupt Judges, and the Untouchable Varnell Ring. The byline was anonymous, but I knew every word. Within minutes, the emails came flooding in. Tips, names, files, and threats. By 12:06 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered anyway. "You think this is over?" Gideon's voice, cold, flat. "It's just starting." "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Neither do you." I hung up, but my hand was shaking, not from fear, from relief, because I'd finally said it out loud, and now everyone could hear it. By 2 p.m., police raided a warehouse tied to Calder and Finch. By 3:30, Judge Barrow issued a statement denying all allegations. By 4, someone leaked his offshore accounts, and by 5:11, Taryn came back, her face pale, eyes red. She dropped a folder on my desk. Everything I could find on the payment listed under my name. It was forged. Someone used a fake authorization chain. My actual signature was lifted from a past NDA. She paused. "But the person who initiated the transfer, you won't like it." I flipped to the last page. Initiator, M. Varnell Maris, my mother. I sat down, hard. "Why?" "I think," Taryn said slowly, "it was to discredit you in advance. Make it seem like you leaked everything for personal revenge. A backup smear, a safety net in case Gideon's empire started to crack." I stared at the paper, not seeing ink, just memories. Of my mother smoothing my hair back before school plays. Of her whispering, "Keep your voice even, Elyse. Varnells don't make scenes." Except they did, behind closed doors, behind forged ledgers, behind my back. That night, I sent a message to the anonymous source who tipped us about the ledger. "Why help me?" They replied instantly. "Because you're the only one who hasn't taken a deal." Then another text, seconds later, "But you won't be the only one for long." At 8:27 p.m., I got a call from an officer I barely knew. "We raided one of the Calder storage sites. Someone torched the inside, but we found one thing you should see." "What is it?" "It's better if I show you." I drove there. The air was thick with smoke and burned rubber. The storage unit was a blackened shell, but inside a fireproof lockbox, a single folder marked in red ink, E. Varnell, contingency, Inside were photos. Me, Taryn, Michael, notes, maps, schedules, a full profile, and a list titled, "If Elyse Escalates." At the bottom, a final line, "Activate Asset C." I stared at it for a long time. "Who's Asset C?" I asked the officer. "We don't know yet?" But I did. Not exactly who, but I knew what it meant. There was still one piece left on the board, one player I hadn't seen, and whoever they were waiting. Asset C. 2 words that haunted the drive home like an echo stuck in my skull. I didn't tell Taryn about the folder right away. Something in me tightened when I read that name, Elyse Varnell, contingency plan. Like I'd stepped into a story someone else had already written for me. And somewhere out there, a hand was holding the pen. We went radio silent for 48 hours. I didn't post, didn't answer calls, didn't move without checking the locks twice. The paranoia wasn't baseless anymore. Every time I turned a corner, I expected a shadow to move faster than it should. Every time I sat at my laptop, I expected a blackout. Instead, what I got was silence. And that scared me more. On the 3rd day, Taryn burst into my apartment without knocking. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with adrenaline. "They're folding," she said. "Blackbirch is burning documents, Barrow's been subpoenaed, Michael's off the grid." I blinked. And Gideon? Still untouched. But people are talking, quietly, like they're waiting for someone to make the final push. "You mean me?" She nodded. "You have the last piece, Elyse. Whatever they're protecting, Asset C, it's their firewall. You expose that and the whole house goes down." My mouth went dry. "Then we find out who it is." Taryn hesitated, then slid a phone across the table. A burner, from one of Michael's old contacts, encrypted. A single message just came through. I picked it up. The message was a sentence. "The one who erased your story was always close." I stared at it. It didn't make sense. I hadn't thought about my old Atlanta project in months. The one I spent a year researching, the one that vanished right before I went freelance. The story about judicial kickbacks. I thought it got buried by the editorial board. Now I knew better. I pulled up my cloud archive, searched my deleted logs. A single document blinked into view, restored. Case draft, Justice in Paper, by Elyse Varnell. Last accessed? Roland's home IP, 2 years ago, but a second access ID flashed beneath it, masked by a proxy. I ran the trace anyway. It ended in Savannah. A coffee shop's public server. Same cafe where I met someone a year later, someone who said she'd heard I was looking to rebuild. Taryn. My pulse thundered. "You erased it." She blinked. "What?" "My draft, in Atlanta. You accessed it, through a proxy, from the Wren Cafe." "I didn't." "Don't lie to me. You said we met by coincidence, but you were tracking me before I ever came to Savannah." She stepped back. "I was warned about you." "That's true, but not the way you think." I stared, jaw tight. "Say it," she exhaled. "I was recruited to keep you close, make sure you didn't spiral too far into the truth. I didn't know everything, just that your name triggered internal audits, scared powerful people." The air left my lungs. She kept going. "But the more I worked with you, the more I realized they underestimated you. You weren't unstable. You were the fuse. And I stopped reporting in months ago. You have to believe me." I did. And I didn't. Both lived in my chest at once. "So who's Asset C?" I asked. "They don't label us, but the ones who disappear, they always call in a third hand when things get messy." That's when it clicked. The man who approached me in the archive building 3 weeks ago said he was just there to make sure records stayed clean. He handed me coffee I didn't ask for, laughed at my questions, left without a name. But his face stayed with me. He had a scar across his left eyebrow, barely noticeable, except I'd seen it once before, at my family's 4th of July party, 6 years ago. On a man my father introduced as a friend from D.C., I pulled out the old family photo from that day, our last happy moment. There he was, in the background, always watching. I scanned the image, flipped it over. Roland's handwriting, July 4th, Varnell House with MSU initials. I pulled up the contingency list, cross-checked names, Matthew Elridge, former federal compliance officer, now private consultant, and according to one Reddit thread, a suspected asset for domestic suppression cases. Bingo. I know who he is, I whispered. I know who Asset C is. Taryn leaned in. What now? We bait him, she frowned. That's dangerous. So is letting him win. That night, I posted a teaser online. A fake headline, Asset C, the fall of an American enforcer. It was enough. The next morning, I got a message from a secure address. Let's talk, one time only, no tricks. The location, an abandoned community center on the edge of town. The same one Roland helped restore 5 years ago. I brought a recorder, 2 copies of the ledger, and every ounce of caution I had left. He was already inside. Same suit, same scar. He didn't stand when I entered. You're smarter than they said, he offered. You're dirtier than I expected, a ghost of a smile. You can leak what you want. But if you do, people you care about will vanish, quietly, forever. You mean like me? No, he said. Worse, like Taryn, like Michael. I clenched my jaw. You think I'm afraid of you? He stood slowly. No. I think you're exhausted, and exhaustion makes people sloppy. So does arrogance. I hit record, made sure he saw the red light blinking. You just confessed to intimidation. Prove it. He turned to leave. It won't save them. He stepped into the shadows, and I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about Gideon. It never was. He was just the bait. The real predator had finally stepped into the light, and now he was hunting me. I couldn't sleep after the meeting with Elridge. Even in the safety of my apartment, every creak of the floorboards felt like a countdown. Every car that passed sounded like it might slow down. But fear was no longer a wall. It was fuel. By dawn, I had a plan. I sent out one final press kit to every media outlet that hadn't yet touched the Varnell exposé. Only this time, it wasn't anonymous. I put my full name on it, Elyse Varnell, independent journalist, whistleblower, survivor. Then I packed a duffel bag, not to run, to testify. 3 hours later, I was standing outside the federal courthouse, my breath fogging in the cold air. Taryn met me on the steps. She hadn't said much since the Elridge reveal, but she was here. And that meant something. She handed me a thumb drive. The final copy of the tapes, Barrow, Gideon, Blackbirch contracts. I took it without speaking. We walked in together, past a line of officers and a clerk who barely looked up. I gave my name. They led me into a quiet room with 3 officials and 1 camera. State your name. Elyse Varnell. Do you understand the risks of this testimony? Yes. And you're doing so willingly? More than willingly, I said. I'm doing it because nobody else would. I gave them everything. Dates, names, bank trails, voice recordings, how the corruption had funneled through shell companies, how judges had been blackmailed, how even my own family had played their parts. I didn't cry, not once. But when I spoke my brother's name, something flickered. Not sadness, something sharper. A wound that had stopped bleeding but never closed. When it was over, one of the officers leaned forward. If this holds up, they'll fall, all of them. Good, I said. They built it on silence, let it collapse on truth. By evening, headlines were everywhere. Gambling ring tied to Savannah officials and former federal agents. Whistleblower Varnell speaks out against family empire. I didn't celebrate. I sat in my apartment, lights off, listening to the quiet like it owed me an apology. Around midnight, my phone rang. Blocked number. I picked up. You win. It was Gideon. His voice cracked. No, I said. I survived. There's a difference. They're going to come for me, Elyse. Then you'd better start telling the truth. Would that even matter to you now? I was quiet for a long moment. No, but it might matter to someone you haven't ruined yet. He hung up without another word. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. And for the first time since Atlanta, I felt light. Not safe, but sovereign. 2 days later, Roland and Maris requested a meeting. I said no, then changed my mind. We met at a public garden in Midtown, neutral territory, quiet, open. Maris looked older. Makeup couldn't hide what guilt did to the eyes. Roland said nothing at first. You were always stubborn, he finally muttered. No, I said. I just stopped lying sooner than the rest of you. What do you want from us? I smiled softly. Nothing, that's the point. Maris reached for my hand. I didn't move. We thought we were protecting the family name, she said. You protected rot, and you let it wear our name like armor. She started to cry. Roland turned away. I stood. This was for me, I said. Not for closure, not for forgiveness, just for the record. They didn't follow. That night I walked along the river. The air was cool and clean, a soft breeze lifting my hair. The street lamps reflected off the water like fractured gold. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was being watched or hunted. I pulled out my phone to delete the backup folder, paused. Something in me whispered, not yet. I emailed a single copy to a locked archive. Subject line, in case of silence. Then I went home and lit a candle. No whiskey, no adrenaline, just me, alone, but finally whole. Until there was a knock, not loud. Not frantic, but certain. I opened the door. An officer stood there, holding a manila envelope. This arrived for you, no return address. Dropped off at the courthouse. Inside was a letter, handwritten, elegant, no signature. It read, "The house may be collapsing, but the foundation runs deeper than you think. Not everyone has shown their face yet. Some of us know how to wait." Tucked inside was a photo. Me, sitting in the garden with Roland and Maris, taken from above, through a telephoto lens. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. The letter sat on my table for days, unopened after the first read, folded once. Its weight wasn't in the paper, it was in the threat. That reminder, some of us know how to wait. But I'd stopped waiting. I didn't know when it happened, maybe somewhere between the subpoenas and the silence. Maybe it was that moment I looked my parents in the eye and didn't flinch. But something had shifted. I wasn't scared anymore, so I burned the letter. Not in anger, not for show. Just one slow flame in the kitchen sink, with the window open and the spring air moving through. I didn't need to keep proof. I was the proof now. A week later, the indictments went public. Judge Barrow, 3 city officials, 2 Blackbirch executives, and Gideon booked on federal charges, racketeering, fraud, obstruction. He didn't speak during the arraignment, didn't look at the cameras, didn't look at me. But as they walked him out in cuffs, I met his eyes. And for the first time in our lives, he blinked first. The press tried to spin it as a surprise. A brilliant manipulator finally caught. But I knew the truth. He was never brilliant. He was enabled. He was protected. And now, he was alone. Taryn stayed. After everything, after the Asset C revelation, after the forged name in the ledger, after the silence between us cracked open into something raw, we talked, really talked. She told me how she got pulled in, why she stayed, and when she started fighting back. And even though trust didn't come easy anymore, I believed her, because she stayed. One afternoon, we walked down to the riverfront with coffee in hand. The water shimmered like it had nothing left to hide. I looked at her. "You could have left." "So could you." We didn't say more than that. Didn't need to. The day I got my final check from the Tribune, the freelance payment for the article that broke the story, I stared at it for a long time. Not because of the number, because it had my name, Elyse Varnell, clean, credible, whole. I cashed it, then donated half of it to a legal aid clinic in Atlanta, the one that had once rejected my inquiry about Gideon's first victim. It wasn't justice, but it was something. Maris sent a message, a long one. She said she was relearning what family means. Said she wasn't asking for forgiveness, just acknowledgement. I replied with a single sentence. "I hope you find peace in the truth like I did." I didn't say more, didn't block her either. I didn't need to slam doors anymore. Some just stay closed on their own. As for Roland, he never wrote. I heard whispers, that he left town, that he may be facing charges too, once Blackbirch's federal links get untangled. But I didn't follow up. The version of him I once needed, father, protector, fixer, never existed. And now I didn't need versions anymore. I started writing again. Not just for newsrooms, for myself. Stories about survival, about corruption, about what it means to lose everything, then build it back with your bare hands. One morning, I received a handwritten thank you letter from the daughter of a whistleblower. Said my story gave her mom the courage to speak up. I cried reading it. Not because I was sad, because I realized something. That somewhere in the wreckage of this family, this mess, this firestorm of lies, I had found my voice. And more importantly, I had used it. They tried to erase me, rewrite my ending, fold me into their legacy of silence. But I spoke, and the world listened. That's the only legacy that matters now. The truth survives the storm, because it becomes the sky when the clouds finally break. So, if you've made it this far, thank you. For sitting with my story, for hearing the parts that hurt and stayed anyway. If you've ever been betrayed and came back stronger, subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. Tell me your story, and stick around. There's more to uncover in the next one.